Ken, it was a busy week on the market structure front. A lot of chatter happening on Twitter. Got some good reporting from a number of folks. Yeah, can you catch us up? What was all the drama this week?
A lot of chatter on Twitter and maybe less chatter on Capitol Hill. So I think as we discussed last week, following the leak of some notes, I think it's arguable what they are, some notes about potential regulations targeting DeFi that Democrats might want to add to the bill. I think that has derailed negotiations such that what I'm hearing from people on Capitol Hill in both parties is that we're kind of back to square one and that negotiations are we're going to have to start fresh. I think there's a lot of bad blood following that leak. One thing I heard consistently from from staffers was that they were really, really off put by the violent reaction. Won't call it violent. We'll call it robust response from industry when that hit. I think it was frustrating to them because in their mind, these were notes that were not intended to be discussed in public, and then they were. And then they all, were taking rounds from all across industry over notes they didn't want published in the first place. Now, again, you can make the case that the existence of that thinking in parts of Congress is not productive. Nevertheless, I do believe that what was released on DeFi was not supposed to be released. And I think the reaction that these offices had to deal with, like 15 minutes after it hit, really has really created a lot of bad blood. Because again, there's not just having to deal with your office being bombarded by messages by lobbyists banging on the door, telling you what you're doing is terrible. But then there's the sense that somebody betrayed the negotiations. And it's really hard to negotiate, especially something like this that's complicated and new. And even staffers and members that I would consider strong supporters of call it digital assets for the purpose of what we're talking about here, market structure. There's still a lot of learning to be done, and this is complicated stuff. So the dust up really, really set things back. I know there was hope that this was going to be done by the end of October. No, it's not going to be done by the end of October. Hopefully, what I'm hearing now is they're hoping to get it done by the end of the year. I think in some quarters, there's just hope that it's going to get done at all. I don't want to sound too, again, this just happened. People are still sort of licking their wounds and doing their sort of grousing on their teams about how terrible other people were. But this was a setback, and it's going to take some time for confidence building to get the negotiations back on track.
There was a video that I think I tagged you on Twitter from Brian Armstrong. But, his usual, we're in the best spot we've ever been in on market structure. We've got, all the momentum in the world. And then he made some comments, and maybe you can remind us of what those were, Ken. Basically talking about regulating protocols versus companies, et cetera, and that was sort of the sticking point that they were hearing from Democrats, I presume. That to me seemed like a pretty negative implication, but curious if you think differently.
So instinctively, when I hear words like AML, counterterrorism finance, crime prevention, I immediately think about self-custody. And that DeFi memo, those notes that were released, were focused on giving the government additional powers to regulate DeFi actors. So I'd rather hear our leading crypto executives talking about self-custody, talking about the rights of software developers. I think that's fundamental. I think without those two things, this industry never reaches full potential. But when I hear these things, DC always talks in code, right? No one's going to say, I'm going to take away your right to self-custody. They'll say, we're going to do things in the name of protecting your children and, all the other tropes. So not encouraging, but we're working on a BPI with saveourwallets.org, is keeping this issue front and center. This is what I talk about when I'm on the Hill. And I don't want to sort of soft sell the interest that members have in this. It's just when we're, again, talking about legislation that's complex, that is an industry that really is only 15 years old at best, not even 10 years old in some instances with the DeFi stuff. There's just not a lot of knowledge, and it's very easy because it fits into the narrative, it fits into the structure that Washington's used to. Washington's used to intermediaries that can tweak and pull and touch and manipulate protocols, financial rails. So it's very natural. So the language you saw in that DeFi memo, it fits into what Washington's used to. It speaks to aspects of law enforcement, regulatory establishment that is just used to having these things and wants to have them, all in the name of protecting you from mysterious criminals. So not terribly encouraging, but the fight's not over. Again, as I do on Twitter every day, for every random opportunity, encourage people to call your representative, call your senator, and let them know that self custody and the rights of software developers are not negotiable. Very important.
Zach, it feels a little bit like your prediction might be coming true here, and that the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act provisions are sort of the piece of the pie that's holding up, the rest of the legislation. Do you think that's a correct take? Do you feel even more confident in your take now?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly couldn't be. I don't want that to be true.
Yeah.
I think this is the hill we need to die on, and so we need this to get through if we're going to be supportive of clarity. And the industry should insist on this. If we're going to have any market structure, it needs to solve this issue, because what does it all mean if you can't build the technology that differentiates blockchain from TradFi? But I think, as Ken mentioned, I think there just is some education that's a necessary prerequisite here, and and some important messaging around, like, no one wants to help the bad guys, right? Like, no one is saying that there should be a loophole in regulation. No one is in favor of North Korea stealing a bunch of money for their missile program. No one's in favor of people using crypto to fund child abuse on the dark web. No one's in favor of using crypto for terrorist financing. And in the absence of sort of new laws, like, all we have is sort of a lack of clarity on where the laws apply. But if you use cryptocurrency, if you use any crypto tools, including non-custodial tools, for criminal purposes, that's still illegal. It's still a crime. If you deploy or build tools for the purpose of aiding criminals, including through money laundering, that's also a crime, right? That's conspiracy to commit money laundering. The thing that we are specifically concerned about is not fighting bad actors that use DeFi. I think everyone's on the same side there. The question is, what prior restraints, if any, should apply to writing code in a neutral way? Putting aside your intent, if your intent is to use the code for bad purposes, we can criminalize the intent. And so hopefully, if we can sort of get that across, that, like, not only is the existing law adequate, but actually, as demonstrated by the giant $15 billion recovery of Bitcoin from non-custodial wallets from the Cambodian law enforcement act we discussed a week or two ago, the existing tools are enough. We just shouldn't also be throwing developers in jail.
Building on what Zach said, we touched on this last week. That seizure is a great example of why focusing on nation state support for these networks is really important. I think TRM Labs did an excellent overview of that seizure. Great detail about the mechanics of how the network worked. A big part of that was, and this is included in the DOJ indictment, the active support of Chinese security services, of Cambodian government officials, not only facilitating but enabling this activity. So I think if we take at face value some of the concerns that members of Congress raise when they talk about regulating DeFi, that criminal activity touches millions of Americans, pig butchering touches millions of Americans. If we take them, and I think there are people in Washington that just don't like the industry, but I think there are people that actually are concerned about these things and want to do the right thing. I think addressing the nation state actor issue is fundamentally, it attacks the root cause of not all of it, but a substantial portion of online crime, certainly involving Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. It addresses a significant part of that, and again, is a real solution to part of the problem. So that's my view. We're talking about that on Capitol Hill a lot this week. We're getting good reception. We're getting sort of the people. I think some of these staffers are just so beaten down by crypto industry coming in yelling at them about DeFi. When they hear actually an interesting perspective that may help solve the problem, they do perk up. And I'm getting a lot of perking up in meetings when I bring up this nation state part, because it addresses some of the core national security aspects of it. It addresses crypto crime, but it also potentially gives the government tools to address outside of pig butchering other aspects of crypto crime, including Lazarus Group North Korea, including ransomware actors, and it doesn't require impeding our ability to self custody, for example.